The candles flicker in the darkness, casting dancing shadows across the marble altar. The Blessed Sacrament rests silently in the golden tabernacle, holding within it the very presence of our Lord Jesus Christ. Tonight, something extraordinary is about to unfold. A miracle that has been waiting centuries to be revealed to souls who desperately need divine intervention. What you are about to discover has transformed countless lives, healed the impossible, and opened doors that seemed forever closed. But here's what most people don't understand about Saint Anthony of Padua and his miraculous intercession through the Blessed Sacrament. If you've been searching for a breakthrough, if you've been crying out to heaven for help that seems to never come, if you've reached the end of your human strength and need supernatural intervention, then what happens in the next few moments could change everything for you. Hit that like button right now if you believe in miracles, and make sure to subscribe because we're about to reveal the most powerful prayer combination known to the Catholic Church. But first, let me ask you this. What if I told you that Saint Anthony of Padua, the wonder worker of the 13th century, left behind a specific prayer method that combines his intercession with the infinite power present in the Blessed Sacrament? What if this combination could unlock the miracle you've been desperately seeking? The monastery bells chime midnight as we enter this sacred space together. The air itself seems to thicken with anticipation. Something powerful is stirring in the spiritual realm, and you're about to become part of it. Saint Anthony stood before the Blessed Sacrament in that small chapel in Padua, his heart burning with love for Jesus truly present in the Eucharist. What happened next would echo through the centuries, touching millions of souls who would call upon his name in their darkest hours. The year was 1231. Anthony had just finished preaching to thousands who gathered to hear the words of fire that flowed from his lips. But it wasn't his eloquence that drew them. It was the miracles, the impossible healings, the way prayers spoken through his intercession seemed to pierce heaven itself and bring down divine intervention. But here's what most people never learn about Saint Anthony. His greatest miracles weren't performed in the crowded squares or before the cheering multitudes. They happened in the silence of adoration, in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, where the fullness of Christ's divinity meets human desperation and transforms it into supernatural hope. Think about this for a moment. Every time you've prayed for something urgent, something that seemed impossible, something that required divine intervention beyond human capability, you were actually following in the footsteps of countless saints who discovered this same truth. The Blessed Sacrament is the source of all miracles. The golden tabernacle door opens slowly, revealing the sacred host nestled within the ornate monstrance. The light catches the gold and creates a radiance that seems to come from another world entirely. This is not mere symbol or representation. This is Jesus Christ himself, the same Jesus who walked on water, who raised the dead, who multiplied loaves and fishes, who said that with faith the size of a mustard seed, nothing would be impossible. And Saint Anthony knew this secret. He discovered that when his prayers were offered in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, combined with specific invocations that had been revealed to him through divine inspiration, miracles didn't just happen occasionally, they happened consistently, powerfully, undeniably. But why Saint Anthony specifically? What made his intercession so uniquely powerful that 900 years later, people still turn to him when they need urgent miracles? The answer lies in a vision that few people know about. A vision that Saint Anthony received while kneeling before the Blessed Sacrament in the dead of night, much like we are doing right now. In this vision, the infant Jesus appeared to him not as a distant figure from history, but as a living, breathing child who spoke words that would change everything. "Anthony," the child Jesus said, "those who call upon you in the presence of my Eucharistic heart will never be denied the help they need. I place within your hands the key to my treasury of miracles." The monastery records from that time speak of phenomena that modern minds struggle to accept. Witnesses reported seeing Anthony surrounded by supernatural light while praying before the Blessed Sacrament. Others claimed to hear angelic voices joining his prayers, but the most extraordinary accounts describe how his prayers seemed to bend the very fabric of reality, bringing healing to the sick, solutions to the impossible, and hope to the hopeless. What was his secret? What combination of prayer and presence created such a powerful conduit for divine intervention? The marble floor is cold beneath your knees as you kneel before the tabernacle, just as countless souls have done for centuries. But tonight, you're not just following tradition, you're engaging in what the mystics call the science of saints, a precise method of prayer that activates supernatural forces most people never tap into. Let me share something that might surprise you about how miracles actually work. Modern quantum physics has begun to touch on truths that mystics have known for millennia. The observer effect demonstrates that consciousness itself can influence physical reality. But what if I told you that the consciousness of Christ, present in the Blessed Sacrament, combined with the intercessory power of Saint Anthony, creates a spiritual force field that can literally rearrange the circumstances of your life? Saint Anthony understood this centuries before science caught up. He discovered that miracles aren't arbitrary gifts from a distant God. They're the natural result of aligning human faith with divine presence in very specific ways. But here's where most people make their mistake. They pray to Saint Anthony as if he were some sort of spiritual vending machine. They recite the traditional novenas, light the candles, make their requests, and then wait passively for something to happen. But the saints who experienced consistent miracles did something radically different. They entered into what we call Eucharistic intimacy, a state of prayer where the boundaries between human desperation and divine compassion dissolve completely. In this state, prayer becomes less about asking and more about receiving, less about speaking and more about listening, less about hoping and more about knowing. The tabernacle before you contains more power than all the nuclear reactors on Earth combined. Not physical power, but the power that spoke the universe into existence, the power that parted the Red Sea, the power that raised Lazarus from the dead. And Saint Anthony discovered how to channel this power for specific, urgent needs. Are you beginning to understand why this method has remained hidden for so long? Religious authorities throughout history have been cautious about revealing techniques that seem too powerful, too direct, too miraculous for ordinary believers. They feared that people might approach the sacred with presumption rather than reverence. But what they didn't anticipate was that withholding this knowledge would leave millions of souls struggling with problems that could be resolved through proper Eucharistic prayer. The candle flames dance higher as we delve deeper into this mystery. Can you feel the presence growing stronger? That's not your imagination. That's the reality of divine proximity responding to sincere seeking. Saint Anthony's method involves what he called the three unions. The union of your desperate need with Christ's compassionate heart, the union of your human limitation with divine omnipotence, and the union of your temporal problem with eternal solutions. But how exactly do you achieve these unions? How do you move from ordinary prayer to the level of intercession that consistently produces miracles? The answer requires understanding something about the nature of the Blessed Sacrament that most Catholics never learn. The silence in the chapel is so profound you can hear your own heartbeat. But listen more carefully. Beneath your heartbeat, there's another rhythm, deeper, stronger, eternal. That's the heartbeat of the Eucharistic Christ, pulsing with the same love that moved him to die on Calvary and rise from the tomb. What you're about to learn has been preserved in the secret archives of certain monasteries for over 700 years. It's the real reason why Saint Anthony's intercession became so powerful that his name alone could bring miracles. The Blessed Sacrament isn't just a memorial of Christ's sacrifice. It's not merely a symbol of his presence. According to the deepest teachings of the Church, it contains the actual substance of Christ's body, blood, soul, and divinity. Every atom of that consecrated host vibrates with the same divine energy that created galaxies and sustains every living creature. But here's what changes everything. When you pray in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, you're not praying to someone who might be listening from heaven. You're praying to someone who is literally present in the same room, the same space, breathing the same air you're breathing. The psychological and spiritual impact of this realization is what transformed Saint Anthony from a good preacher into a miracle worker. Think about the last time you desperately needed something to change in your life. Remember how that desperation felt in your chest, that tight feeling of anxiety mixed with hope. Saint Anthony learned to take that exact feeling and place it directly into the presence of Christ in the Eucharist, not as a distant prayer, but as an intimate conversation between friends. The ancient texts describe his method as Eucharistic intimacy, a way of praying that treats the Blessed Sacrament not as an object of worship, but as a person to confide in. Anthony would kneel before the tabernacle and speak to Jesus as if they were old friends discussing urgent family business. "Jesus," he would say, "you know this person's heart. You know their need. You know they've tried everything human wisdom can offer. What do you want to do for them through your servant Anthony?" And then he would wait, not for audible words, but for the subtle inner movement that indicates divine response. Sometimes it came as a sudden certainty about what to pray for, sometimes as a vivid mental image of the person being healed or helped, sometimes as an overwhelming sense of God's eagerness to intervene. But the key element that made his prayers so effective was what he called sacramental specificity. Most people pray in generalities. "Please help me. Please heal them. Please change this situation." But Anthony learned to pray with the precision of a surgeon and the boldness of someone who knew they had access to unlimited divine resources. Are you ready to learn his exact method? Before we continue, I want you to do something right now. In the comments below, write the single most urgent need in your life. Don't explain it, don't justify it, just state it clearly. Writing it down in faith is the first step toward receiving the miracle you need. Go ahead, do it now. Did you write your need in the comments? Good, because what you're about to learn next will show you exactly how to present that need to Jesus through Saint Anthony's intercession in a way that opens heaven's storehouse of miracles. The monastery clock strikes 1 in the morning. This is the hour when the veil between heaven and earth grows thin, when saints throughout history have reported their most powerful mystical experiences. The golden light from the tabernacle seems to pulse with each tick of the clock, as if keeping time with the eternal heartbeat of God himself. Saint Anthony discovered that effective prayer in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament isn't just about words. It's about creating a complete spiritual environment that includes specific physical gestures, mental attitudes, and spiritual positioning that together create what he called the perfect storm of intercession. The first sacred gesture is what he termed the positioning of surrender. You don't simply kneel before the Blessed Sacrament. You place your entire body in a position that communicates complete abandonment to divine will. Your hands open and extended, palms facing upward, symbolizing your willingness to receive whatever God chooses to give. Your head slightly bowed, not in defeat, but in recognition that you're in the presence of infinite wisdom that sees solutions you cannot imagine. But here's what most people miss. Your body position affects your spiritual receptivity. When Saint Anthony knelt in this specific way, he reported that he could literally feel the presence of Christ more intensely. The physical act of surrender created an inner environment where miracles became not just possible, but inevitable. The second sacred gesture involves what he called the offering of wounds. Every person who comes to this prayer carries wounds: financial wounds, relational wounds, physical wounds, spiritual wounds. Instead of hiding these wounds or being ashamed of them, Anthony discovered that offering them directly to the Eucharistic Christ creates a powerful exchange. Your wounds become the very place where divine healing enters your life. He would place his hand over his heart and mentally present each wound to Jesus present in the tabernacle. Lord, I offer you this broken place in my life. Transform it into a miracle that will give glory to your name and hope to others who suffer as I suffer. The third sacred gesture is the most powerful and the most dangerous to those who aren't ready for rapid divine intervention. Anthony called it the claiming of promise, based on Jesus' own words in Scripture. Ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. Anthony developed a way of praying that moved from petition to possession. Instead of merely asking for help, he learned to claim the promises of Christ with the authority of someone who knew they were speaking to a God who cannot lie. Jesus, he would say while gazing directly at the tabernacle, you promised that those who ask in faith would receive. I am asking in faith for this specific miracle. I am not begging. I am not hoping you might consider my request. I am claiming what you have already promised to those who come to you in sincere need. This wasn't presumption. This was faith operating at the level that moves mountains. But wait, before you try this yourself, you need to understand something crucial about spiritual authority and the consequences of this kind of prayer. When you pray with this level of intensity and specificity in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, you're engaging spiritual forces that will absolutely respond. But the response might not come in the form you expect or in the timing you prefer. Are you prepared for that possibility? The candles flicker as a cool breeze moves through the chapel, though no windows are open. That's often a sign that spiritual activity is increasing. The saints who have gone before us are gathering, attracted by sincere prayer and desperate faith. St. Anthony once said that praying in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament is like standing in a river of divine mercy that never stops flowing. The question isn't whether the river has power to carry you to your miracle. The question is whether you're willing to step into the current and let it take you where God wants you to go. Are you willing? Because what comes next requires not just faith, but courage. The kind of courage that says yes to God, even when you can't see the entire path ahead. The air in the chapel has grown thick with expectation. You can feel it pressing against your skin, that electric sensation that precedes lightning strikes and supernatural interventions. This is the moment when theory becomes reality, when centuries of mystical tradition crystallize into practical application. What you're about to receive is the exact prayer formula that St. Anthony used to channel miraculous interventions through the Blessed Sacrament. But I must warn you, this isn't a prayer to recite casually or experimentally. This is a spiritual technology that activates divine forces beyond human comprehension. The formula consists of 7 distinct movements, each one building upon the previous to create a crescendo of faith that pierces the heavens and brings down the impossible. First movement, the recognition of presence. You begin by acknowledging not just that Jesus is present in the Blessed Sacrament, but that he is present specifically for you, in this moment, for this urgent need. This isn't theological theory. This is relational reality. Jesus, I acknowledge that you are truly present in this Blessed Sacrament, not just present in general, but present for me specifically. You knew I would come to you tonight with this desperate need. You have been waiting for this moment, preparing the miracle I require. Can you feel the shift that happens when you pray this way? Instead of approaching God as a distant deity who might or might not pay attention to your problems, you're acknowledging a personal relationship with someone who has been expecting you. Second movement, the invocation of St. Anthony. St. Anthony of Padua, you who experienced the intimate presence of the child Jesus, you who learned the secrets of Eucharistic prayer, I call upon your intercession, not as a stranger, but as your spiritual brother-sister who shares your love for the Blessed Sacrament. Join your voice to mine. Let your proven power with God combine with my desperate faith. Third movement, the specific presentation. This is where most prayers fail. Instead of vague requests, you present your need with the precision of a legal document and the passion of a parent pleading for their child's life. Through St. Anthony's intercession, I present this specific need. Here you state exactly what you need with complete honesty and detail. I do not ask you to consider this request. I do not ask you to think about whether I deserve this miracle. I present this need based on your own promise that those who ask in faith will receive, and I am asking in faith. But here's where the prayer becomes truly powerful. Fourth movement, the exchange of trust. Jesus, I offer you my fear, my doubt, my human limitations, and in exchange I receive your peace, your certainty, your divine omnipotence. I am no longer the person who doesn't know how this problem can be solved. I am now the person who knows that you already have the solution prepared. Fifth movement, the time declaration. This is perhaps the most controversial aspect of St. Anthony's method, but also the most effective. You declare a specific time frame for the miracle, not to limit God, but to demonstrate that your faith is concrete and expectant. Through St. Anthony's intercession, I expect this miracle to manifest within, specify a reasonable time frame, not because I demand it, but because I believe it. I will watch for it with the same certainty that I watch for the sun to rise tomorrow morning. Sixth movement, the gratitude proclamation. I thank you for this miracle as if it has already occurred, because in your eternal perspective it already has. What I see as future intervention, you see as present reality. I align my faith with your perspective and give you praise for what you are already accomplishing. Seventh movement, the sealing commitment. Saint Anthony, as I leave this place of prayer, I carry with me the certainty that heaven has heard and heaven will respond. I commit to living as someone who has already received their miracle, trusting in divine timing and giving glory to God when the answer manifests. The candles seem to burn brighter as this prayer concludes. That's not coincidence. That's confirmation. When prayer reaches a certain intensity in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, even physical elements respond to the spiritual energy being generated. But what happens next is entirely up to you. 3 days have passed since countless souls around the world prayed the miracle formula you just learned. The reports are already beginning to arrive. Phone calls in the middle of the night bringing news that seemed impossible. Email messages typed through tears of joy. Social media posts that begin with, "You won't believe what just happened." But before we explore these testimonies, you need to understand how to recognize when heaven is responding to your prayer. St. Anthony taught that divine intervention rarely arrives with trumpets and fanfare. More often, it comes disguised as coincidence, opportunity, or sudden inspiration that leads to exactly what you needed. The first sign is what mystics call the peace of certainty. Within hours of praying the miracle formula in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, many people report a profound shift in their emotional state regarding their urgent need. The anxiety doesn't just diminish, it transforms into a quiet confidence that somehow, somewhere, divine machinery has been set in motion. Maria from São Paulo wrote, "I had been desperate about my son's drug addiction for 3 years. After praying your St. Anthony formula, I woke up the next morning with complete peace about the situation. Not because anything had changed externally, but because something had changed in my heart. 2 weeks later, my son called asking for help to get clean. He said he couldn't explain why, but he suddenly felt ready to fight for his life. The second sign involves what St. Anthony called divine synchronicities, events that seem random but create the exact conditions needed for your miracle to manifest. James from Dublin reported, "I was facing bankruptcy, and after doing the prayer, I randomly met a former classmate at a coffee shop I never visit. During our conversation, he mentioned a business opportunity that perfectly matched my skills. Within a month, not only was bankruptcy avoided, but I was earning more than I had in years." But here's what you must understand about these signs. They require spiritual discernment to recognize. The devil is real, and he has his own counterfeit miracles designed to lead souls away from authentic relationship with God. How do you tell the difference between genuine divine intervention and spiritual deception? Saint Anthony provided 3 tests for authentic miracles. First, true miracles always draw you closer to God, not away from Him. If what you receive makes you proud, self-sufficient, or less dependent on prayer, it's not from heaven. Second, authentic miracles always benefit others beyond yourself. Divine interventions create ripple effects of grace that touch multiple lives, not just your own. Third, real miracles always increase your desire to serve God more faithfully. They don't just solve your problems, they transform your heart. But what happens when the signs don't come? What if you pray the formula with sincere faith and nothing seems to change? This is where most people abandon the process, not understanding that sometimes the greatest miracles require the deepest faith. Saint Anthony experienced what he called the dark night of waiting, periods when God seemed silent despite fervent prayer. During these times, he discovered that continuing to thank God for the unanswered miracle was itself a form of prayer that eventually broke through every barrier. The miracle, he wrote in his journal, is not just the external change you seek. The deeper miracle is the transformation of your soul during the waiting period. God sometimes delays the answer not because He doesn't hear, but because He's preparing you to receive something far greater than you originally requested. Share in the comments if you've experienced any of these signs since learning about this prayer method. Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to strengthen their faith during their own waiting period. The tabernacle light continues to burn steadily, a reminder that divine presence never wavers even when human faith fluctuates. That consistency is your anchor during the times when you can't see or feel immediate evidence of answered prayer. The cathedral bells chime the hour of divine mercy, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This is the same hour when Jesus breathed His last on Calvary, the same hour when the ultimate miracle of redemption was accomplished. It's also the hour when Saint Anthony reported his most powerful mystical experiences in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. What you're about to learn has been shared with only a select few throughout church history. These are the advanced mysteries of Eucharistic intercession that Saint Anthony discovered during his final years, when his prayer life had reached such intensity that witnesses reported supernatural phenomena occurring regularly in his presence. The first advanced mystery involves what he called vicarious intercession, the ability to receive miracles not just for yourself, but for others who cannot pray for themselves. This isn't simply praying for other people. This is entering into such deep spiritual union with their need that your faith becomes their faith, your prayer becomes their prayer, your access to divine mercy becomes their access to divine mercy. Anthony discovered this principle when a mother brought her dying child to him. The child was too young to have personal faith, and the mother was too devastated by grief to pray effectively. Anthony realized that someone needed to stand in the gap to become the bridge between this family's desperate need and God's infinite compassion. He knelt before the Blessed Sacrament and prayed not just for the child, but as the child. He presented himself to Jesus as if he were the dying infant, allowing his own faith to cover the child's inability to believe. Within hours, the fever broke, and the child recovered completely. But here's the crucial understanding that makes this level of intercession possible. When you pray in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, you're not just accessing your own spiritual resources, you're plugging into the infinite merits of Christ Himself. His faith becomes your faith, His righteousness becomes your righteousness, His power becomes your power. The second advanced mystery involves what Anthony called temporal transcendence, the ability to pray for situations in the past or future with the same effectiveness as present circumstances. This sounds impossible until you remember that the Blessed Sacrament contains the eternal Christ who exists outside of time. For Him, everything is present tense. Your childhood trauma, your future fears, your ancestors' mistakes, your descendants' potential, all of it exists in an eternal now where divine intervention is always possible. Anthony once prayed for a man whose father had abandoned the family 30 years earlier. The man had carried the wound of abandonment his entire adult life, and it was destroying his marriage and his relationship with his own children. Anthony prayed before the Blessed Sacrament as if the abandonment were happening in the present moment, asking Jesus to heal not just the current effects, but the original wound itself. The results were astounding. Not only did the man experience profound emotional healing, but his father, who had disappeared decades earlier, suddenly contacted the family with a desire to reconcile and ask forgiveness. Time is not a barrier to divine intervention when you're operating from the eternal perspective of Eucharistic prayer. The third advanced mystery is the most powerful and requires the greatest spiritual maturity. Anthony called it divine assumption of identity. In the deepest states of Eucharistic prayer, the boundary between your identity and Christ's identity begins to dissolve. You're not just asking Jesus to perform a miracle, you're allowing Jesus to perform the miracle through you, as if you were his hands, his voice, his heart in the physical world. This is the level of prayer that produced the most extraordinary miracles in Anthony's ministry. People weren't just healed in his presence, they were healed by his presence, because he had become so united with Christ in the Eucharist that divine power flowed through him naturally. But attempting this level of prayer without proper spiritual preparation can be dangerous. It requires complete purification of motive, absolute surrender of personal will, and mature understanding of spiritual authority. The candles in the chapel have burned lower, but their light seems more intense. That's often what happens during advanced Eucharistic prayer. The physical environment begins to reflect the spiritual reality of increased divine presence. Are you ready to move beyond ordinary prayer into these deeper mysteries? Because what comes next will challenge everything you thought you knew about the relationship between human faith and divine power. The shadows are growing longer in the chapel, and the silence has become so profound that each heartbeat sounds like thunder. This is the threshold moment when casual seekers turn back, and only the truly desperate press forward. Because what you're about to learn about the cost of authentic miracles will separate those who merely want divine intervention from those who are willing to pay the price for it. Saint Anthony discovered that every miracle carries a hidden cost, not because God demands payment, but because divine intervention always transforms the recipient in ways they don't expect. The person who receives a miracle is never the same person who originally requested it. The first price is the surrender of control. When you pray for a miracle using the methods we've discussed, you're not just asking God to solve your problem. You're asking him to rearrange your entire life around his perfect will. The miracle you receive might be exactly what you requested, or it might be something completely different that turns out to be far better than what you originally wanted. Anthony counseled people that praying for miracles is like giving God a blank check signed with your life. You present your need, but you surrender the right to dictate the solution. This requires a level of trust that many people find terrifying. Sarah from Chicago learned this when she prayed desperately for her husband to stop drinking. She expected the miracle to change him. Instead, the miracle changed her, giving her the strength to set boundaries, the wisdom to stop enabling his addiction, and ultimately the courage to leave the marriage. 6 months later, faced with real consequences for the first time, her husband entered recovery and began rebuilding his life. The miracle saved them both, but not in the way she anticipated. The second price is increased spiritual responsibility. People who receive miracles through Eucharistic intercession find themselves carrying a burden they didn't expect. The knowledge that divine intervention is real, available, and responsive to sincere faith. This knowledge makes them responsible for praying for others who are suffering, even when it's inconvenient or emotionally costly. Anthony warned that those who have tasted the power of God cannot pretend ignorance when they encounter others who are starving for that same power. Miracle recipients often find themselves becoming prayer warriors, intercessors, and spiritual guides for people they've never met. The third price is the most challenging and the most transformative. Recipients of authentic miracles discover that their relationship with suffering has fundamentally changed. They no longer pray primarily to escape difficulties, but to understand how their difficulties can become vehicles for divine glory and service to others. This doesn't mean they become passive or stop seeking solutions to problems. It means they develop what mystics call the sacramental view of suffering, the understanding that their pain, united with Christ's passion, becomes a source of grace for the world. The fourth price involves what Anthony called the gift of spiritual hunger. Before receiving their miracle, most people are satisfied with occasional prayer and routine religious observance. After experiencing authentic divine intervention, they discover an insatiable appetite for deeper prayer, more intimate relationship with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, and greater understanding of spiritual mysteries. This hunger can be inconvenient. It might mean rising earlier for prayer, staying later for adoration, choosing spiritual reading over entertainment, or finding ways to attend daily Mass. The miracle creates a spiritual awakening that demands lifestyle changes. Marcus from London wrote, "I prayed for healing from chronic pain and received complete relief within a week. But I also received something I didn't ask for, an overwhelming desire to spend time in Eucharistic adoration. I now find myself at the chapel almost every day, not because I have to, but because I can't stay away. The Blessed Sacrament has become like oxygen to me. But here's what you need to understand about these costs. They're not punishments or divine demands for payment. They're the natural consequences of coming into contact with infinite love, perfect wisdom, and unlimited power. When you experience God's direct intervention in your life, everything else pales in comparison. Nothing satisfies except more of God. The tabernacle door reflects the candlelight like a mirror, and for a moment you can see your own face reflected in its golden surface. That's prophetic. When you engage seriously with Eucharistic prayer for miracles, you begin to see yourself reflected in divine love. You discover who you really are beneath all the layers of fear, doubt, and human limitation. Are you willing to pay these prices? Because understanding the cost beforehand is what separates genuine miracle seekers from spiritual tourists who want the benefits of divine intervention without the responsibility that comes with it. Take a moment to consider what your life might look like if the miracle you've been praying for actually manifests. Are you prepared for the person you might become in the process of receiving it? The clock on the chapel wall has stopped moving, not because it's broken, but because in moments of deep spiritual crisis, time itself seems to suspend. You've been praying the miracle formula for days, weeks, maybe months. You've followed every instruction, surrendered every doubt, positioned yourself in perfect faith before the Blessed Sacrament. And still, heaven seems silent. This is the valley where most souls abandon their quest for miraculous intervention. This is where the enemy whispers his most convincing lies. You're not holy enough. Your faith isn't strong enough. God doesn't really care about your problems. Miracles are for other people, not for you. But Saint Anthony discovered something profound during his own periods of apparent divine silence. He learned that sometimes God's greatest miracles are hidden in his seeming absence. The silence isn't rejection, it's preparation. During the months when Anthony's prayers seemed to bounce off heaven's closed doors, he was actually being prepared for miracles so powerful that they would require tremendous spiritual strength to handle. The waiting period wasn't God ignoring him, it was God strengthening him. Consider the story of Martha from Dublin, who prayed for 3 years for her son's release from prison. Every day she knelt before the Blessed Sacrament. Every day she invoked St. Anthony's intercession. Every day she claimed the promises of Christ for her boy's freedom. And every day, nothing changed. Until the day everything changed. Not only was her son released early due to a legal technicality no one could explain, but during his final months in prison, he had experienced a profound conversion. He emerged not just free, but completely transformed. The 3 years of apparent silence had been 3 years of invisible spiritual work that produced a miracle far greater than simple early release. If he had been freed when I first started praying, Martha realized, he would have gone back to his old life and probably ended up in prison again. God's delay saved his soul. This is the mystery of divine timing that most people never understand. Your miracle isn't late. It's perfectly timed for maximum impact, not just in your life, but in the lives of everyone who will be affected by it. But how do you maintain faith during these periods of apparent silence? How do you continue believing when every external indicator suggests that your prayers are ineffective? Saint Anthony developed what he called the discipline of expectant waiting. This wasn't passive resignation or religious fatalism. It was active faith that continued to prepare for the miracle even when no evidence of its approach was visible. The discipline involves 5 daily practices that maintain spiritual momentum during dark nights of the soul. First, the practice of thanksgiving for the unanswered miracle. Every morning, before you even get out of bed, you thank God for the miracle as if it happened overnight while you were sleeping. This isn't denial of reality, it's alignment with divine perspective where your miracle is already accomplished. Second, the practice of intercessory expansion. Instead of only praying for your own need, you begin praying for others who face similar challenges. This shifts your focus from your own pain to the broader work of divine compassion in the world. Third, the practice of sacramental consistency. You maintain regular visits to the Blessed Sacrament, regardless of how you feel, what's happening in your circumstances, or how long you've been waiting. Your presence before the tabernacle becomes a declaration of faith that transcends emotion. Fourth, the practice of testimony preparation. You begin preparing the story of your miracle before it manifests. You consider how you'll share it, who you'll tell first, what lessons you'll draw from it. This isn't presumption, it's faith creating space for divine intervention. Fifth, the practice of sacrificial offering. You identify specific sacrifices you're willing to make in exchange for your miracle, not because God needs your sacrifice, but because sacrifice demonstrates the sincerity of your desire and creates spiritual space for grace to operate. These aren't mechanical techniques, but living expressions of faith that refuse to be defeated by apparent delay. They transform waiting from passive endurance into active cooperation with divine timing. The golden light from the tabernacle seems to pulse with each breath you take, as if responding to the rhythm of your heartbeat. That synchronization isn't coincidental. It's the physical manifestation of spiritual alignment between your human need and divine compassion. But what if the silence continues? What if months become years and still no visible answer comes? What if other people receive their miracles while yours remains hidden in heaven's mysterious timing? This is where St. Anthony's most profound teaching comes into play. He discovered that sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the external change you're seeking, but the internal transformation that occurs while you're seeking it. Sometimes God's answer isn't yes or no, it's become. Become the person who could handle the miracle you're requesting. Become the soul who could steward divine intervention responsibly. Become the vessel pure enough to channel supernatural power without being corrupted by it. The silence isn't punishment, it's purification. The delay isn't denial, it's preparation for something greater than you originally imagined. Dawn is breaking through the stained glass windows, painting the chapel in colors that seem to come from another world. The vigil is nearly complete, but something extraordinary is beginning to happen. The prayers you've offered in this sacred space aren't just creating change in your own life. They're creating ripple effects that will touch people you've never met, in places you've never been, in ways you'll never fully understand. This is what St. Anthony called the multiplication effect. the mysterious way that sincere prayer in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament creates benefits that extend far beyond the original intention. Every time someone receives a miracle through Eucharistic intercession, that miracle becomes a source of faith for others. The healed person tells their story, and their testimony plants seeds of hope in hearts that had given up believing in divine intervention. Those newly hopeful hearts begin to pray with renewed faith, and their prayers produce more miracles, which inspire more people to believe, which generates more prayer, which releases more divine power into the world. One miracle becomes 10, 10 become 100, 100 become 1,000. The mathematics of grace follow exponential rather than linear progression. Consider the story of Father Miguel, a priest in a small Mexican village who learned the St. Anthony prayer method during his own desperate need for healing from a terminal illness. After his complete recovery, he began teaching the method to his parishioners. Within 2 years, their little church became known throughout the region as a place where miracles happened regularly. But the transformation extended beyond individual healings. The entire community began to change. Crime rates dropped as people found hope for their problems through prayer rather than through destructive choices. Family relationships healed as couples learned to bring their marriage difficulties to the Blessed Sacrament instead of to divorce courts. Young people who had been leaving for the cities began staying to help build a community where the supernatural was normal. The economic situation improved as people started businesses based on inspirations received during Eucharistic prayer. The school system strengthened as teachers discovered that praying for their students produced better results than any educational technique. Even the weather seemed to cooperate, with droughts ending and harvests improving in ways that meteorologists couldn't explain. One priest's miracle had multiplied into an entire community's transformation. This is the hidden purpose behind every authentic miracle. It's never just about solving one person's problem. It's about demonstrating God's active presence in the world in ways that inspire others to seek their own divine encounters. Your miracle, when it comes, will become part of this ever-expanding network of divine intervention. The healing you receive, the door that opens for you, the provision that arrives just in time, these aren't isolated events. They're part of God's ongoing campaign to reveal His love and power to a world that has forgotten how to hope. But here's what makes this multiplication effect even more powerful. It doesn't require you to wait until your own miracle manifests before you can participate in it. The moment you begin praying with authentic faith in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament, you become part of the network. Your prayers start generating spiritual energy that contributes to miracles for people you'll never meet. The mother in Brazil who prays for her addicted son contributes spiritual force to the healing of an alcoholic father in Ireland. The businessman in Hong Kong seeking divine guidance for his failing company adds faith energy to the prayers of an unemployed worker in Detroit. The teenager in Nigeria praying for acceptance to university strengthens the petitions of students worldwide who seek educational opportunities. This is the mystical body of Christ operating at its most fundamental level. Individual needs becoming collective intercession, personal desperation becoming communal hope, private miracles becoming public testimonies to divine power. Share your story in the comments when your miracle comes, not for personal recognition, but to become part of the multiplication effect that will inspire others to seek their own divine intervention. Your testimony might be exactly what someone needs to hear to take their first step toward the tabernacle where their own miracle awaits. The sun is now fully risen, flooding the chapel with natural light that blends with the supernatural radiance emanating from the Blessed Sacrament. Day and night, human and divine, time and eternity, all boundaries dissolve in the presence of Eucharistic love. The morning light streaming through the chapel windows creates a pathway of gold leading directly to the tabernacle. This visual metaphor captures the essential truth about miraculous prayer. There is always a pathway between your desperate need and divine intervention. The question isn't whether the pathway exists, but whether you're willing to walk it completely, What you're about to learn represents the culmination of St. Anthony's mystical understanding of Eucharistic intercession. It's the final key that unlocks not just occasional miracles, but a lifestyle of ongoing supernatural intervention. But it requires a level of surrender that most people find frightening. St. Anthony called it the death of personal agenda. Most prayer is contaminated by our limited understanding of what we actually need. We pray for specific solutions based on our finite perspective, not realizing that God sees connections, consequences, and possibilities that remain invisible to us. Our prayers often ask God to perform miracles that would actually harm us in the long term or prevent greater miracles that He wants to accomplish. The final surrender involves releasing your attachment to the specific form your miracle takes while maintaining absolute faith that divine intervention will occur. This isn't the same as passive resignation or religious fatalism. It's active cooperation with infinite wisdom that recognizes your need, but reserves the right to address it in ways that serve your highest good and God's greatest glory. Maria Elena from Madrid discovered this principle when she prayed desperately for her husband to recover from a coma following a car accident. For months, she knelt before the Blessed Sacrament, claiming his healing, declaring his recovery, expecting him to wake up. But instead of improving, his condition deteriorated. At her darkest moment, she finally prayed the prayer of final surrender. Jesus, I release my husband completely to your will. If healing him serves your purpose, heal him. If taking him home serves your purpose, I surrender him to you. I trust that whatever you choose will be the expression of perfect love for both of us. Within hours of that prayer, her husband peacefully passed away. But in his final moments, he awakened long enough to tell her that Jesus had been with him throughout the coma, preparing him for eternal life and showing him how his death would become a source of strength for her and their children. The miracle wasn't the healing she requested. The miracle was the peace that surpassed understanding, the supernatural strength to face widowhood, and the certain knowledge that death had been conquered by divine love. 6 months later, Maria Elena received an inheritance from her husband's life insurance that allowed her to start a ministry for families dealing with traumatic loss. Through her testimony, hundreds of people found hope in their darkest hours. Her husband's death became the foundation for miracles in countless other lives. This is the mystery of final surrender. It often produces miracles far greater than what we originally requested, but it requires releasing our grip on our own solutions. The practice of final surrender involves 3 movements that take you beyond ordinary petition into the realm of mystical cooperation with divine will. First movement, the offering of outcome. Jesus present in this Blessed Sacrament, I offer you not just my need, but my attachment to any specific solution. I release my timeline, my expectations, my demands for particular results. I place my situation entirely in your hands, trusting that your answer will be perfect, even if it looks different from what I'm envisioning. Second movement, the claiming of trust. Through St. Anthony's intercession, I claim not the specific miracle I think I need, but the perfect miracle you know I need. I trust your wisdom more than my understanding, your love more than my fears, your power more than my limitations. Third movement, the declaration of readiness. I am ready to receive whatever you choose to give, to accept whatever you choose to withhold, and to cooperate with whatever you choose to require. My faith is not dependent on getting what I want, but on knowing that you always give what is best. The candles have burned down to small pools of wax, but their light seems brighter than ever. That's the paradox of final surrender. When you stop grasping for specific outcomes, divine power flows more freely through your circumstances. But don't misunderstand this teaching. Final surrender doesn't mean you stop praying specifically or that you become passive about your needs. It means you pray with the intensity of someone who knows that God always answers prayer, even when his answer transcends human expectations. The tabernacle door stands slightly open, as if inviting you to peer into the mystery of divine love that surpasses human comprehension. Inside that sacred space, Infinite compassion waits to address your need in ways that will astonish you with their perfect appropriateness. Are you ready for that level of divine intervention? Are you prepared for miracles that exceed your imagination while serving purposes greater than your personal comfort? The vigil is complete, but the journey is just beginning. As you rise from your knees and prepare to leave this sacred space, you carry with you more than just hope for divine intervention. You carry the keys to a lifestyle of ongoing miraculous encounter with the living God present in the Blessed Sacrament. What happens next will determine whether tonight's prayer becomes an isolated religious experience or the beginning of a transformed life where the supernatural becomes natural, where divine intervention becomes as regular as sunrise, where your relationship with Jesus in the Eucharist becomes the source of continuous miracle. The first 24 hours after this prayer vigil are crucial. This is when the spiritual momentum you've built begins to translate into physical reality. You may experience what mystics call the convergence period, a time when seemingly unrelated events begin arranging themselves to create the exact conditions needed for your miracle to manifest. Pay attention to everything: the phone call that seems random, the person you unexpectedly encounter, the opportunity that appears from nowhere, the sudden inspiration that provides a solution you hadn't considered. These aren't coincidences. They're the visible evidence of invisible spiritual forces working on your behalf. But equally important is maintaining the spiritual state that made this prayer effective in the first place. The faith you access during this vigil must become a permanent attitude, not a temporary religious emotion. This requires what St. Anthony called sacramental living, organizing your entire life around regular encounter with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, not just during crisis moments or special needs, but as the foundation of daily existence. Sacramental living means beginning each day with at least a few minutes in the presence of the tabernacle, even if it's just stopping by the church on your way to work. It means ending each day by mentally presenting the events of the day to Jesus in the Eucharist, thanking Him for His hidden presence in every circumstance. It means making major decisions only after consultation with the Blessed Sacrament. It means treating the church not as a building you visit occasionally, but as the home where your closest friend lives and waits for your company. Most importantly, it means becoming a conduit for the miraculous power you've experienced. As your own life is transformed through Eucharistic intercession, you become responsible for introducing others to the same possibility. This doesn't require becoming a preacher or a religious professional. It simply means living in such obvious peace and joy that people begin asking what makes you different. When they ask, you tell them about the friend who lives in the tabernacle and loves them more than they can imagine. The multiplication effect we discussed earlier depends on people like you who have tasted divine intervention and can't keep quiet about it. Your miracle, when it comes, becomes the seed for someone else's faith. Their miracle becomes the seed for another person's hope. The cycle continues until entire communities are transformed by the power of Eucharistic prayer. But remember this crucial point: the greatest miracle isn't the external change you receive, but the internal transformation that occurs as you learn to live in constant communion with Jesus, present in the Blessed Sacrament. The healing of your body, the restoration of your relationships, the provision for your needs, the opening of closed doors, all of these are wonderful gifts, but they pale in comparison to the gift of intimate friendship with the God of the universe, who chose to remain present in the Eucharist specifically so that no one would ever have to face life's challenges alone. As you leave this place of prayer, you're not leaving Jesus behind. You're taking Him with you in your heart, and you know exactly where to find Him whenever you need to be reminded of His presence and power. The tabernacle light will continue burning long after you've gone home. It burns for you. It burns for everyone who will come after you seeking the same miracle power you've discovered tonight. It burns as a constant reminder that divine love never sleeps, never abandons, never stops working on behalf of those who turn to it in faith. Before you go, let me ask you to do 3 things that will ensure your miracle manifests and multiplies. First, commit to returning to this prayer method whenever you face new challenges. Don't wait until desperation drives you back to the tabernacle. Make Eucharistic intercession your first response to difficulty, not your last resort. Second, document your miracle when it comes. Write down the details, the timing, the emotions, the unexpected ways it unfolded. These records will strengthen your faith during future challenges and provide testimony that encourages others to seek their own divine intervention. Third, share this prayer method with at least one other person who needs a miracle. Don't wait until you feel qualified or holy enough. Share it while the fire of your own desperation still burns bright, because that authenticity will give power to your words. The morning sun is now fully illuminating the chapel, but the supernatural light emanating from the Blessed Sacrament remains constant. Day and night, in seasons of joy and sorrow, during times of clarity and confusion, that light burns steadily as a beacon for souls who need to know that miracles are still possible. Your miracle is already in motion. The spiritual forces activated by your prayer are already rearranging circumstances, opening hearts, creating opportunities, and preparing the perfect conditions for divine intervention to manifest in your life. Watch for it. Expect it. Prepare for it. And when it comes, remember to give glory to God and gratitude to Saint Anthony of Padua, whose intercession helped bridge the gap between your human need and divine compassion. The vigil is complete, but your miracle journey has just begun. Go in peace, knowing that heaven has heard your cry, and heaven will respond with perfect love at the perfect time in the perfect way. And don't forget to like this video if it blessed you, subscribe to our channel for more powerful prayer content, and share your miracle testimony in the comments when it manifests. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to kindle their own faith for divine intervention. Until next time, may the Blessed Sacrament be your strength, Saint Anthony be your intercessor, and miraculous love be your constant companion. Amen.